Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson. Chapter 33. The Fall of a Chieftain. There was never such an overturn in this world. Each of these 6 men was as though he had been struck, but with Silver the blow passed almost instantly. Every thought of his soul had been set full stretched, like a razor, on that many. Well, he was brought up in a single second, dead, and he kept his head, found his temper, and changed his plan before the other has time to realize the disappointment. "Jim," he whispered, "take that, and stand by for trouble." He passed me a double-barreled pistol, and then the same time he quietly moving northward in a few steps had put the hollow between us two and the other 5. He looked at me and nodded, as much as to say, "Here's a narrow corner," and, indeed, I thought it was. His looks were now quite friendly, and I was so revolted at these constant changes, I could not forbear whispering, "So you've changed sides again?" And there was no time left for him to answer in. The buccaneers, with oaths and cries, began to leap, one after another, into a pit, to dig with their fingers, throwing the boards aside as they did so. Morgan found a piece of gold, and he held it with perfect spouts of oath. It was a 2-guinea piece, and it went hand in hand among them for a quarter of a minute. "2 guineas!" roared Mary, shaking it at Silver. "That's our 700,000 pounds, isn't it? You're a man for bargains, ain't you? You're him and never bungled anything, for you wooden-headed lubber." "Dig away, boys," said Silver with the coolest insolence. "You'll find some pig nuts, and I shouldn't wonder." "Pig nuts!" repeated Mary in a scream. "Mates, do you hear that? I tell you, and that's man they knew all along. Look in the face of him. You see it wrote there." "Ah," Mary remarked, "standing for captain again? You're a pushing lad, to be sure." And every one was entirely in Mary's favour. They began to scramble out of the excavation, darting furiously glances behind them. And one thing I observed, and looked well for us, they all got out on the opposite side from Silver. Well, we stood there, 2 on one side, 5 on the other, the pit between us, and nobody screwed high enough to offer the first blow. Silver never moved. He watched them, very upright on his crutch, and as cool as I ever saw him. He was brave, and no mistake. At last, Mary seemed to think of a speech might help matters. "Mates," said he, "there's 2 of them alone here. One's old cripple that brought us all here and blundered down this. The other's that cub that I meant to have a heart of. Now, mates," he was raising his arm, but his voice plainly meant to lead a charge. But just then, crack, 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 3 musket shots flashed out of the thicket. Mary tumbled head foremost into the excavation. The man with the bandage spun round like a teetotum, and fell on his length on both sides, where he lay dead, but still twitching. And the other 3 turned and ran for it with all their might. Before you could wink, Long John had fired 2 barrels of pistol into struggling Mary, and as the man rolled his eyes at him in the last agony, "George," said he, "I reckon I settled you." And at the same moment the doctor, Gray, and Ben Gunn joined us with smoking muskets among the nutmeg trees. "Forward!" cried the doctor. "Double quick, my lads. We must head 'em off the boats." And we set off at a great pace, sometimes plunging through the bushes of the chest. But I tell you, Silver was anxious to keep up with us. The work that man went through, leaping on his crutch till the muscles of his chest were fit to burst, and with no work sound man ever equalled. So thinks the doctor. As it was, he was only 30 yards behind us, on the verge of strangling when he reached the brow of the slope. "Doctor," he hailed, "see there, no hurry." Sure enough, there was no hurry, but in a more open part of the plateau we could see still 3 survivals running in the same direction as they started, right for Mizzen's Mass Hill. We were only between them and the boats, so we 4 sat down to breathe while Long John, mopping his face, came slowly up to us. Thank you, kindly doctor," said he. "You came in about the nick of time, I guess, for me and Hawkins." "So it's you, Ben Gunn," he added. "Well, you're a nice one, to be sure." "I'm Ben Gunn, I am," replied the Maroon, wriggling like an eel in his embarrassment. And, he added, after a long pause, "How do, Mr. Silver? Pretty well, I thank you," says you. Ben, murmured Silver, "to think you were done of me. The doctor sent Gray for one of the pickaxes, and deserted in their flight by the mutineers, and then, as we proceeded, leisurely downhill where the boats were lying, related to a few words what had taken place. It was a story that profoundly interested Silver, and Ben Gunn, in the half-idiot maroon, was the hero from the beginning to end. Ben, in his long, lonely wanderings about the island, had found a skeleton. It was he had rifled up. He found a treasure and dug it up. It was a shaft of a pickaxe that lay broken in the excavation. He carried it on his back in many weary journeys, from the foot of the tall pine to a cave he had two pointed hill, at the northeast angle of the island, and laid stored in safety since 2 months before the arrival of the Hispaniola. When the doctor wormed his secret to him, it was afternoon of the attack, and when the morning he saw an anchorage deserted, he had gone to Silver, given him the chart, which was now useless, given him the stores, for Bengun's cave was well supplied with goat meat, salted by himself, given anything and everything to get a chance of moving in safety from the stockade at a 2-point hill, there to be a clear of malaria, and keep a guard upon the money. As for you, Jim, said he, it went against my heart, but I did what I thought was best for you who had stood by their duty. And if you were not one of these, whose fault was it? That morning, finding that I was to be involved in the horror disappointment he'd prepared for the mutineers, had run all the way to the cave, and leaving the squire to guard the captain, and taken Gray and the maroon, and started making the diagonal across the island, and to be at hand besides the pine. Soon, however, he saw that our party had started of him, and Ben Gunn, being fleet of foot, had been dispatched in front to do his best alone. Then it occurred to him to work upon the superstitions of his former shipmates, and he was so far successful that Gray and the doctor had come up and were already ambushed before the arrival of the treasure hunters. "Ah," said Silver, "it was fortunate for me that I had Hawkins here. He would have let old John be cut to bits." "And never given it a thought, doctor." "Not a thought," replied Dr. Livesey, cheerily, and by this time we had reached the gigs. The doctor, with a pickaxe, demolished one of them, and then we got all aboard, and set out to go round the North Sea. This was a run of 8 or 9 miles. Silver, though he was almost killed already with fatigue, was set to an oar like the rest of us, and we were soon skimming swiftly over a smooth sea. Soon we passed out the strait and doubled the sea east corner of the island, which around 4 days ago we had towed the Hispaniola. As we passed a 2-point hill, which we could see the black mouth of Ben Gunn's cave, a figure standing in it, leaning on a musket. It was the squire. We waved a handkerchief and gave him three cheers, in which the voice of Silver joined as heartily as any. In 3 miles farther, just inside the mouth of the North Inlet, what should we meet but the Hispaniola, cruising by herself. The last flood had lifted her, and there had been much wind, or a strong current, as if the southern anchorage. We should have never found her more, or found her stranded beyond help. As it was, there was little amiss, beyond the wreck of the mainsail, and another anchor was got ready. It dropped in a fathom and half in water. We pulled round to Rum Cove, and nearest point of Bengun's treasure house. Then Gray, single-handedly, returned with the gig to the Hispaniola, where he was to pass the night on guard. A gentle slope ran up from the beach to the entrance of the cave. At the top the squire met us. To me he was cordial and kind, saying nothing to the escapade, neither in a way of blame or praise. At Silver's polite solitude he somewhat flushed. "John Silver," he said, "you're a prodigious villain and an impostor. A monstrous impostor, sir. But I am told I am not to prosecute you. Well, then, I will not. But the dead men, sir, will hang about your neck like milestones." "Thank you kindly, sir. replied Long John, after again saluting. I dare you to thank me, cried the Silver. It's gross dereliction of my duty. Stand back. Thereupon the and thereupon we all entered the cave. It was a large and airy place, with a little spring and a cool pool of clear water, overhung with ferns. The floor was sand. Before big fire lay Captain Smollett. In a far corner, and only duskly flickered over by the blaze, I beheld a great heap of coins and quadrilaterals built of bars of gold. That was Flint's treasure, and we had come so far to seek, and that it cost only so many lives of 17 men from this Hispaniola. And how many it had cost them amassing, what blood and sorrow, and what good ships scuttled on the deep, what brave men walking with the plank, cruelty had perhaps no man alive could ever tell. Yet there was still three upon that island, Silver and old Morgan and Bengen, who had each taken a share of these crimes, and had each hoped in vain to share the reward. "Come in, Jim," said the captain. "You're a good boy in your line, Jim, but I don't think you and me will ever go to sea again. You're too much of the born favourite for me. Is that you, John Silver? What brings you here, man?" "Come back to my duty, sir," replied Silver. "Ah," said the captain, and that was all he said. What a supper I had of a night of it! And with all my friends around me, what a meal it was, with Bengun's salted goat and some delicacies, and a bottle of old wine from the Hispaniola. Never, am I sure, were the people gayer or happier. And there was Silver, sitting back almost out of the firelight, but eating heartily, prompt in to spring forward when anything wanted, even joining quietly in our laughter, and the same bland, osseous seaman of the voyage out.